Hello, welcome back, everyone. Thank you for joining us again, coming back from this break. We now have Black in Lutherie with Amanda Ewing and Anne Harris. In this luthier-musician collaborative presentation, we're going to have a conversation between Anne and Amanda. Amanda, our first recorded African-American female violin maker, and violinist Anne, and they will share their journey of a historic collaboration, the first known violin commission between two Black women. I'm going to give you a very brief introduction about them both, and then give them space to talk about themselves and have the conversation. So I'll start with Amanda. Amanda is a violin maker and a 2021 Women in Lutherie Fellow. She is Nashville-based. She makes violins, cellos, and bass. She began her Lutherie journey in January 2018, and is proud to represent Black makers in a predominantly white field and to inspire makers from Black communities to join her at the bench. She founded Black in Lutherie. Anne Harris is a fiddle player. She's a roots and blues fiddle player, singer, songwriter, and recording artist who spent her time in lockdown founding an artisan body butter business called Radical Self-Love. Sounds fantastic. Hello, Anne and Amanda. How are you ladies doing?
Hello.
Good. Hello. Thank you so much for having us and for those beautiful introductions.
It's great to see you, and I'm looking forward to listening to both of you. So I'm going to disappear, and when you have 10 minutes left, I'll let you know so we can have space for Q&A.
Perfect. Sounds great.
Right.
Thank you so, so much.
Thank you.
Yes, bye-bye.
Bye. Hi, good morning, Anne.
Good morning, love. How is everything in Nashville?
It's a little gloomy, but I'm glad to be here with you and to continue to share and expand our story, because hasn't it taken on a life of its own?
It absolutely has. It's mind-blowing to us, and I guess most people that are on here don't know us, and so I guess we're going to start just by telling the people who we are, how we met.
Yeah. Tell the people who you are. Let them know all of your fabulousness.
Okay, all of my glory here in my little basement. As we were so kindly introduced, I am a fiddle player. I work primarily in the blues and American roots genres. I was classically trained, but I left my behaving behind me a long time ago and went the route of improvisational music. So that's what I do professionally. I most of my work is in live performance, but I do quite a bit of recording. I do string arrangements for people on their records. I make my own records. I also am a songwriter. And my path has never been linear. It's always been jigs and jags through the forest, leading me to the next great discovery. And one of those great discoveries is how we met. So that's sort of my background. I'm based in Chicago. I went to the University of Michigan School of Music and then moved to Chicago after graduating. So Chicago has been my home base. But as I mentioned, a lot of my work is on the road and touring, although I do perform a lot in the Chicago area as well. So that's kind of who I am, the Cliff Note version. You want to do the same thing for everybody, then we'll kind of get into how we met.
Yeah, I've been zigzagging throughout life as well. And it has led me to this beautiful spot. I will admit that the journey has been, it has included a lot of anxiety, but there's not a lot of growth without some sort of discomfort, right? Because when we're uncomfortable, we tend to shift. Even when we're uncomfortable in our own chairs, we shift. And so navigating life, if there is some discomfort, there's some need to shift. And sometimes the shift comes spontaneously. And even when we think about these shifts, we want it to be gentle, but sometimes it has to appear a certain way in order to produce impact, in order to produce change. And that's kind of what happened with me towards the end of 2017 when I was working in corporate America. And I knew that there wasn't a lot going on there for me. It wasn't really filling up my cup, but I wasn't really sure the path that I was going to take. And I was praying to the God of my heart, what's my next direction? I know it's going to be wild, probably. I am ready for it. I'm not ready for it, but I am. So here we go. Right? It's like
Always.
we are in the heart, and the mind produces something a little bit different. But
Absolutely.
as things may be, it was kind of a layoff. I was given the opportunity to do something else in a company that I did not enjoy, or leave and figure it out. So I was like, okay, well, that's more of my lane anyway. I just go and figure it out. So I decided to do that, and decided to just say yes and yes and yes and yes and yes to anything that felt good that came my way, because I had plenty of time to at that time. And so one of those was saying yes to being a part of having my own violin made, because I had a student violin, and being a part of the process. And I was just thinking back as Yasmin was introducing us, wow, it's been 5 years, and it doesn't seem like that. I haven't changed a bit. But 5 years since I've been introduced to and met so many inspiring women working with their hands. And I know I've known of women working with their hands before, right? Some of the obvious things, we know chefs, and we know like hairdressers and other things that are traditionally female-ish, but woodworking, absolutely not. Like it just seemed so raw, and it seemed so masculine, and how I was introduced to it was through another male. And I did not know that this was also a thing that women can do, and and I didn't know if it would be something that I wanted to do as well. But I got into it, and I had a lot of headaches, and I had a lot of doubts. And after the momentum of things started to happening, I had a lot of fear. And then there was a little tiny microscope on me, and that feels uncomfortable as well, even though it was in its small size. And after I realized that, look, Amanda, this is way beyond you. The universe is sending you signals that, yes, this is you, but the impact can go way beyond you. And there's something greater here that you can accomplish. So having that mind shift and say, oh, yeah, there is something greater that I can accomplish, because I spent a little bit of time trying to find individuals who looked like me, who were like me. So it was easier to find females. Actually, the females found me, and I was so grateful for that. And I'm like, wow, blown away by these female woodworkers and violin makers and guitar makers, but I didn't see anyone who looked like me. And so then that was where my energy would go towards, and I was just thinking, where are all the people? And then once I didn't find any who were female and Black, I was thinking, well, maybe just African descent, Black identifying, and then didn't find any really of those individuals either. And so I started to really embrace the journey as one that can have to leave an indelible mark on the world.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's something that we kind of one of the things that I think we're similar in so many ways.
I know, right?
I know, it's just you're my sister from another mister and mama, and I love it. And I think one of the things that's really interesting, and I'm wondering if a lot of the people in this space, in fact, I don't have to wonder, I'm sure that's why we're in this space. When we arrive into spaces where we don't see other people looking like us. We don't see a lot of us, because again, my work specifically working as a fiddle player, a woman in the genre of blues. There's a couple of us, but so few. I don't think we go into our spaces with the intention of I'm going to be a groundbreaker and break ground. It's kind of like it's not intentional in that way. I think what's beautiful is that we're led by a passion, led by a fascination, led by questions like, well, I want to do this, or I want to learn this thing, or I want to create this thing. And you're so driven by the passion, you're not really looking at the context that sits in. And when you take the bigger step back and you realize, oh, it's in the context of a space that traditionally has not hosted us. And I don't know that that is necessarily always intentional. It's just that's the way our culture is. That's our history. That's the history of an instrument that is of European origin, and a craft that has been, pretty much the foundation of it has been built by the hands of white men, which that's just the history of the instrument. That's not a judgment or any sort of bad thing necessarily. It's just that's where it came from. But as we continue to sort of grow and evolve ourselves in this country that sort of has given us this narrative of dream, and you can reach your dreams and do whatever you want to do. I mean, on one hand, it says that there's a part of us that does have that. If you want to learn something and you're driven by the passion of it, you're not necessarily thinking first that the space is not one in which you don't look like you might belong classically or traditionally. So I think that's one thing I love so much about the way you have arrived, because you're a historical figure. Like, you could retire now and you've already made history, and you're just getting going. And I think that a lot of people, probably that's the question people want to ask: what's it like to be the first one? And I always love the way you approach that answer, because it's like, well, I didn't want to be. I'm not even that proud that I am. It's kind of scary and sad. Do you want to speak a little bit to that? People being so so fascinated and so interested in your sticking the flagpole in the ground.
Yeah, and when I reach back into my history, I realize that I've occupied this space for forever. And maybe I was not able to do anything about it. A long time ago, I was a gymnast. And in all the gyms that I practice in, I was the only Black gymnast. And when I was gaining my inspiration in gymnastics, I looked towards Dominique Dawes, and she was also the only Black gymnast. And when I was taking ballet in the studios that I went to, it was the same. When I went to college, the same. So I was talking to someone else about it, and this has really been a theme, maybe just tiny whispers at the time in my youth. There was nothing really that I can do about it, right? And I don't even think I was thinking about that when I was 11, 12, and 13. I didn't have that thought process. But as I traveled through life, it continued to show up. And when it showed up here in Lutherie, there was just like this explosion inside. I don't know if I had come to a point where I'm just sick and tired of it. And I have more knowledge and more wisdom, and I'm able to self-direct, and I'm able to do something about it really intentionally. Because at that time in my youth, I just wanted to flip around. I mean, I knew that there weren't people that looked like me. There wasn't any Black individuals, but I just wanted to flip around. And as I continued to go through life, I did have these notices. But even in college, I wasn't really sure if there was anything that I can really do about it. How can I expand it? How can I bring people in? How can I let people know that there's a safe space on this campus for you as well, and we should also start talking about the lack of diversity here at this private Christian school. But now I feel like I've accumulated the tools of life that life has given me to be able to make this sort of impact here in Lutherie, and it's been supported. It's even been supported, by you showing up into my space and all of these yeses. I was on the journey of the yes, and then everything else coming to my space was just underscoring that yes, including you showing up in my DMs.
It's funny how there is a law of attraction. That's this invisible energy that when you allow yourself to live in a space of risk with your heart open, when you override your own fear and your own editor, and you just go, okay, um, I'm just going to take this leap of faith, literally. Some kind of net will always present itself,
Mm-hmm.
and the landing will be soft enough that you can sort of go, oh, this is kind of cool. Well, what if I leap over here? What's gonna, where am I going to land? And oh, I lost one of my ears here. And I think the more you take those little leaps of faith, the greater your consciousness grows, which is a magnet for that energy coming into your life that will lead you to the next
Yes.
opportunity that will afford growth in that way. And it's not necessarily a linear thing. I was looking at the comment here about someone talking about the history of the banjo,
Mm-hmm.
and how it's similar to, its legacy. And actually, a lot of people don't realize the banjo did come from Africa, the original incarnation of it, and then it was changed and developed in the States. So the banjo itself, and back, I've done a lot of research and studying and playing of old time fiddle music and slave fiddling, and that's been a big fascination to me,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of people don't realize that the banjo and the fiddle were more popular than guitars back in the days of enslaved people playing on plantations. And many times plantation owners would send slaves to New Orleans, which was the capital of that time of Black fiddling, to train their enslaved people how to entertain. They
Mm-hmm.
would come back to the plantations and entertain for the white enslavers, and also they would be encouraged to play for their own people. So there's a very rich history of like, okay, well, we were learning these instruments. We also had to learn how to make them and maintain them. We know there were makers that don't go on record. And that's another thing that, when we talk about history and firsts,
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about a very narrow view of what history is,
Right.
because we're bound by the written word and who wrote the word. And honestly, the as we know, the written tradition in music is a very narrow, there's, it's really a pretty narrow band there of historically in the scope of music in the world, and indigenous cultures. Most music, as most stories, were passed along orally, and
Yes.
most traditions were passed along from person to person.
Mm-hmm.
So, oh, I just went off on a total different tangent. I knew this was gonna happen.
It's all related. It's all related.
But I think just when you're talking about how you had to be open and available, to bring it back into what you were saying originally.
Yeah.
You have to be in a space to be open and available for those opportunities to come to you, and that's the space you were in. And a lot of times that space is just born out of desperation and like fear, and I don't know what I'm doing with my life, and so I'm just going to try this thing because why not, because other things I've tried haven't worked, or I'm overwhelmed with this sense of curiosity that's overriding the fear.
Mm-hmm.
That's certainly, I think, how I just keep stumbling along in my career as a musician. I don't even know that I ever made a choice to, I'm going to do this. I just was overcome with an overwhelming sense of love for the sound of the violin when I was like 3 years old. And my mom took me and my sister to see the movie version of Fiddler on the Roof, and I have a vague memory of it. And she's like, "Yes, you stood up in that theater in the opening sequence where Isaac Stern was in silhouette playing violin, that gorgeous overture, and you said, 'Mommy, that's what I want to do,' and you just wouldn't shut up about it." And that led to the journey of discovering, just following that sound, and which I'm still doing. I will never master it. I'll be far from it. But what I am getting closer to as I continue to level up is closer to really just honoring that space of pure love that I originally started with when I was the little kid, and stripping away the expectations of trying to fit into a sound, trying to fit into a repertoire material, which I think is part of why classical music as a genre didn't speak to my soul. I love it, but I always knew it wasn't going to be the way that I would interpret my soul. Like I really had to do that with just following my own thing, and my own sensibilities. Um, and a couple of years ago, this is going to segue into how we met. Trying to keep us on course. And I'm looking at comments too. There's some beautiful comments here. There's some people enabling my wanderings. So
I think Yasmin is going to take hold of those comments like 10 minutes till.
I was just about to say there are 10 minutes left. We don't have anything in the Q&A section. So if you would like to continue speaking, and Anne, if you'd like to address any of the comments that grabbed your attention, please go for it. I think everyone is enjoying this talk.
Yes.
Great.
I'll let you know when there are 5 minutes left.
Okay. Thank you so much. So the way we met was a couple of years ago. I have been playing on the same instrument, German Roth violin that is a reproduction of a Guarneri 1761 instrument. This instrument, it was crafted in 1734. My instrument was crafted in 1961 by the Roth Company. And it's just a workhorse instrument that my parents bought me when I moved into a full-size instrument. And I've played on it all these years. It's the only instrument I've ever owned, the only violin I've ever owned. It's the instrument I learned on. And because I play contemporary music, I have a pickup installed on it. So it's a piezo bridge pickup by L.R. Baggs. And so my practicing is acoustic, but when I perform, I'm generally plugged into a system. And I love the sound of the instrument. It's been amazing for the work I do, but I've been thinking about broadening my sound, and that it's time to start shopping around for a new instrument, for a new violin. And that's been in the back of my mind. And about a year ago, it was during pandemic, the algorithm brought me
the algorithm guides.
Yes, brought to me into my realm Amanda's profile. And then within a day of randomly seeing that, a very dear friend of mine sends me a link to her profile and says, "Do you know about this woman? Do you guys know each other? You have to." And I was transfixed immediately. I saw this for the first time in my life, a beautiful woman of color crafting instruments, and I just knew she had to make my next violin, that I had found the person to craft my violin. And then we got to know each other online. I stalked her, and she was and she didn't block me. And one thing led to another, and we ended up meeting in Chicago when she was here on business earlier this year, which I can't believe it was the same year. It seems like so much longer ago.
I know.
And I had the great honor and pleasure of playing on her very first instrument that Amanda ever crafted, and fell in love with the gorgeous tone. It's a beautiful instrument, and that was what sealed the deal. I just knew Amanda would be making my instrument. So I will now lob it to you. I've been manipulating this whole conversation.
What's so interesting, Anne, too, is I remember like when you had contacted me, I was at like the end of the apprenticeship. And so during that time, the Instagram gods were still working and people were coming into my inbox and inquiring about instruments. And I had a lot of anxiety. I had a lot of fear. And I think a lot of it was built up. I don't know about anybody else, but I don't remember having this much anxiety before the pandemic. And I think I acquired a lot during that time. There was just a lot of movement, a lot of changes, a lot of newness. And so it kind of stuck with me anyway. And so people were asking about it. And I was just like, I think I had said a lot of no's. I was like, well, or, putting people off, and I like a lot of people, maybe a handful. And then you came into my inbox and it felt a little different. And so you never know how things are really going to work out, but I did feel open to you. I did. And so I was like, this would be cool. And of course I Instagram stalked and I was like, this is a rock star I'm dealing with. And just all the things about you felt really good, even from the other side of the screen. And I thought, yeah, like this would be fantastic if I was able to work with this individual. Like in my heart, it felt really good. And so the fact that it all unfolded, it was insane how it all unfolded. And the fact that we got together, and it was so, and I think I told you about how much of a blessing it was, because kind of like the end of my apprenticeship, there was like an incident, and it didn't really stamp it the way that I would have loved it to be stamped after working so hard for a long time. And I just thought that it kind of ended like one of those shows that you have that ends so abruptly. You're just like, what the hell is happening in this journey? And it just ended, and I thought, okay, what does this mean? Does this mean that this is how it's going to continue? I created all these stories in my mind about it. And then when everything aligned, that we were able to be in Chicago. I mean, I know you were already in Chicago, but I was coming to Chicago, and then you reached out at the exact same time. And we met, I was like bawling.
We have footage of it too.
I was like, this is really was the sign, that I really needed to know that, yes, you are still on the right course. No, it doesn't always feel great, but oftentimes seeking a bigger impact that's greater than yourself doesn't really feel great.
Absolutely.
But this is where you're supposed to be at this moment and at this time. And it's okay to feel all the things that you feel, but not allowing your pain to derail your purpose. So trying to get out of me and into the purpose that I feel like I have been brought to through you, through making, through all the individuals that I've met and the ones that I continue to meet, to facilitate such a very important change that I need to see. And that change is going to impact everything else too. It's going to impact other worlds that don't have people who are Black identifying. That's going to have that one person that's really afraid to step out there because they may be alone, because they may not be supported, because perhaps people don't want to see diversification in their particular industry, and let them know that, hey, it was done over here and it was done in this area, and it can be done whatever area that you try to pursue yourself. So all these yeses and yeses make up for a little bit of the pain that comes along with the journey. It's not all like that.
Yeah.
But it does show up, and it's like, okay, we still have to keep moving forward.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I feel like,
I was just about to say, ladies, that we have a really good question that links really beautifully with what you were just saying, Amanda. Okay. We have a question from Nina. How can we support the wonderful work you are doing? And wondering if there's potential to do something like this in Europe, where Nina is.
Absolutely.
We have 2 minutes.
Yes. How can you support continuing to share our story? I mean, that's been the whole theme of it. I haven't been doing one thing or the other. I have just been, thankfully, people have come into my space and wanting to hear about it. From magazines to the GoFundMe campaign was kind of like a huge explosion, all these other things that have shed light onto the lack of diversity, and that there's people in here who are wanting to see the change. So, talking about things, sharing things, and also actively, what I'm doing is I'm actively seeking out individuals who want to be a part of this industry who may need support, because I think that's a bigger thing, that people may not be able to go to school, which is why Women in Lutherie is so important, because there's a lot of women who are showing that, hey, I am open, I am wanting to help anyone. And there's individuals who can't spend however much it costs to go to the Chicago School of Violin Making. There's some people who cannot travel and go to an apprenticeship and leave their job and leave their family and do all these things to be able to pursue something that they're passionate about. So keep talking about us, keep linking to us, let people know. I'm posting on social media. I'm trying to do my part here in this community. I'm bringing the violin into neighborhoods where a woman, she was in her, I think her 60s, and she played the violin for the first time yesterday here in Nashville, Tennessee. And it was just so beautiful. And that's a story that she's going to have, that she's going to carry with her, and that she's going to talk about, which will bring more awareness to Black and Lutherie and what we're trying to accomplish.
Thank you very much, ladies. That was a fantastic conversation. I genuinely enjoyed listening to it. And I can tell that lots of people enjoyed listening to it as well from all the comments in the chat. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your experience. And I'm looking forward to looking at your websites.
Thank you so much. We're honored to be here.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and please stay tuned in. We have a long break, and after that we have another panel, which I know you're both going to be on.
Yeah.
Which is also fantastic. So everyone, you're still going to get to hear more from Amanda and Anna and Anne in more other panelists in about 19 minutes time. So if you can please come back at 25 past.